Grandpa told me I was named for her. And we went down to Ypres and found her the headstones in that old pioneer cemetery. And so I thought, well, I want to find out, you know. Did she cross the plains with a hand cart, or did she come by oxen? I don't know how I knew.
It seems to me like that she did cross the plains with a hand cart. I don't know whether it's imagination on my part or what, but they had no log stable back in the place up there. It's been torn down for years. And it seemed to me like when I was a little kid that there was a hand cart in that old stable back there. I was only, gee, well, when we moved there, I was in the 3rd grade. So
7 years old.
I'd be pretty young, but it seemed to me like when I was just playing around there, you know, those little ships. It seemed to me like there was a hand cart. I've often wondered about it. I really don't know anything about my grandfather.
Niels?
Niels Peter, that named after him.
Yeah.
I started filming it.
He was dead before I was born. And, well, I guess he would be dead before I was born. And, but I don't know how he met my grandmother.
Well, she was the second wife.
She was, well, he was polygamous.
Polygamous, yeah.
And I don't know how he met her. And I bet I asked, that's why I say I think when I go over and talk to Lamar and see, there's a lot of questions I should have asked him. I wasn't interested at the time. So,
Well, I don't know if he knows, if he would know, because he's never shared
do you
it.
have any idea how he met her?
I don't know, because he came over in 1861, and she came in 1867. And they lived in 2 different counties, but that doesn't mean much in a tiny area. They may
But
have
did
known.
he come from Denmark?
Yes, he did.
Or did he know her over there?
That I don't know. See, that I don't know. But he had to be fairly well off, because the first presidency wouldn't allow polygamous marriages if the husband couldn't financially support both of them.
I think for those days that he was pretty well off.
I did find when he came over with his first wife, he had money. He had 1,500 English pounds. I don't know if that's a great deal. It sounds like a lot to me now. He had a wagon and several horses that he either sold or brought with him, but at the time he was leaving Denmark, that's what he listed in his assets, so he could go. So,
Where did you find that?
in the, where did I find it? I've got it home, one of the departure
No,
things from Denmark.
you've clarified a lot of things for me right here in just these few minutes about him. I didn't know whether he was here and met her here, or whether he came from Denmark. I didn't know whether he was.
He may have known her, but one thing I found out too is that she was married before.
Was she?
She had a first husband who was divorced him because he abandoned her in Utah, in Sanpete County. She divorced him, and I was looking for Neil Peter's will, and I ran across the divorce.
I didn't know that.
So then she married Neil Peter 2 years later, 3 years, 2 years later. After that, so if they knew one another in Denmark, I don't know.
Well, where did he meet his first wife?
Put your hand down, and then you're in the tape recorder.
Oh,
No, that's okay, but if you'll keep your hand down.
Did you get, I found in Mother's papers, a long book of remembrance sheet. It says excerpts of the Niels Peter Anderson history, and it was written by his grandson, and it's not real complete for our family, but he does have information about Niels Peter and his first wife, and evidently they met because they were working on the same farm or some such, you know, real close. I just kind of skimmed over it. But if you don't have a copy of that, I will copy it and send it to you.
Oh, I would love that. I have to say, I've been in the dark on Niels Peter Anderson. Here I'm named after him. I don't know nothing about it.
And I don't know where Mother got it. she got it from, if it was, you know, his mother was the
All
repository
right,
after
to
Grandpa
clarify
died.
this, I've always had the understanding that you met her some way, I don't know how, like you said,
Well, she
old
told you.
Hospital Denmark. But she actually was converted to the Mormon faith over there, and she left, the understanding I had was that she left her husband and her family and took her mother, she and her mother, who we used to call Mutu, which is big grandmother, came over, those two came over across the plains, and she was married to him here. Now, is that right?
I don't know where, I don't know, now you're talking about Mary Ann, your grandmother.
Yeah.
I don't know where she married her first husband. I know she divorced him in San Pete County.
She did divorce him in Denmark.
She divorced him. I found, that's why I say, I was looking for Niels Peters' will.
It's right there.
And the film, you know, started early, and I was just going through it, and I found the divorce. That she divorced her first husband.
I never knew she was married. I thought she was just a young girl when he married just the same one.
Well, she was fairly young. She was 24.
Plug it in.
She was 24, but
He's got a copy of the will here, of a will.
Oh, you've got it.
He walked over, handed it.
okay. Now there was another. Oh, this is Andrew.
Is that the son or?
Yeah, that's the son.
There's one thing I want to tell you kids here.
Well, there's a big one.
You can't go on the headstones down in the Eagle
I
Cemetery.
know.
Because Orson and Andrew, which would be my grandmother's sons, they both got on this Orson act, Orson. Oh, I don't know what his purpose on it, but he loved the name of Niels Peter. And his
That's
name
on the
is actually
headstone.
Orson Erastus. And his name was, no, Orson Erastus Pratt Henry.
Oh, that's his name? Okay.
He was named after Orson Pratt. one of
And
the-
Erastus Snow,
Yeah,
probably.
and,
Oh, I didn't know
but
that.
he,
On your headstone,
he
it's
took the
Niels
name
Peter, all of it.
of Niels Peter. And so on his tombstones down there, he bought the tombstones down
He had
there.
it put on.
All the cemetery, and he put Niels Peter on there.
That was
Andrew.
my grandfather did that. Is that what you're saying?
But,
Who was it that put that on there?
I think
Lamar?
Orson.
I think
Oh,
Orson
Orson did.
I think
Oh.
Orson,
And also
This works
Andrew
great. Look at this.
was named
Just right on.
Andrew what?
Gretman.
Gretman. That was his name, but on the tombstone down there, his name is Orson Niels Peter, or Andrew Niels Peter.
Well, now they had
sometimes,
twins.
sometimes when you go down and look at it.
Okay, now, she had twins that died
At birth.
at birth. But one was Andrew, and one was Niels Peter. And then she had, Orson. Anyway, then she had Andrew, and then had Orson. So she had two Andrews. But you're talking not in the old Pioneer Cemetery that these two
No.
elderly
No,
uncles.
yeah.
You're talking the
The new one.
The new one. Well, I have not seen those gravestones. Have you been down, Lavar, to Ephraim and seen in the new cemetery, found Orson and Andrew's headstones?
You're way ahead of me.
They're very-
I mean, when I went down there, Grandpa took me down right after my mission
Grandpa,
to the old
Grandpa,
cemetery.
Grandpa Christensen is buried,
Mark
they
got
have the lots
graves
there.
down there. He
So
had
Orson
planned
and
to move
Andrew
them,
are
but
both
never
buried
did.
side by
And
side, you know.
Dan has
One
got
of
a
them
couple,
fought.
and they're right together.
Oh,
They're on
okay.
they're on the northeast corner of the cemetery.
Well, I've seen your mother and father's, but I didn't
And
realize
Orson
that
and
Andrew and Orson
right
were
there
back
with
there.
them, right there in
Okay.
between. They're in, here's his
And
mother
then the
dead.
old cemetery, they're kind of on the southwest
Right.
corner.
Right, I found those.
Okay.
And I really neglected to take pictures of them. I just wrote what it is, and you're supposed to draw the headstone and all that, and I have not done that.
Marianne, I know this is really basic because you're way past this, but just for my benefit, could you just real quickly tell me, I don't know anything about Grandpa's and Uncle Cleon's family, going back, just a real quick overview of
I
His-
can't
his
hear
mo-
you at all.
Just
I was
why
just
don't-
asking,
why don't you come over
just
and
just
talk
a
in
real
the
quick
chair?
overview of who his
Come
mom
on,
and dad, who his
Mary
brothers and
Okay, his
sisters.
mother was Sina,
Or just sit next to him.
Messina.
Yeah,
But she
Messina.
went by Sina Anderson, Johanna Anderson, and she married James Christian Otto Martin.
Why not?
And Christensen. Jens, actually.
We never
went
did
by
find
James.
out all his names.
But isn't James James? I think
He Americanized it to James. I have not looked on the Christensen side. I have just looked on your mother's people's side. And so her mother was the second plural wife of Niels Peter Anderson. And her mother, that's Mary Ann Madsen Anderson, that would be the second wife, brought her mother with her, and her name was Margreta Sorensen. And they are buried all together in that old Pioneer Cemetery.
As far as Cleon and Grandpa's family is concerned, Jens was his
Father.
stepdad, and the mother was Sina.
Right.
And Jens came over to Denmark. His father's family was the first one to immigrate.
Right.
So your dad, you were born and raised in America, but your dad,
I'll tell you something here that I found out that wasn't really advertised. My father came over here as just a young boy, and he never took out naturalization papers or anything, so actually he was an illegal immigrant all his
Yeah.
life, you know.
Uh-huh. But he came with his family? He came with his parents, or did he
Yeah,
come alone?
I can faintly remember my grandmother lived out in Chester with his brother. And it was called, his brother's name was D.C.
Because I know I was telling you about
TC.
in Grandpa Christensen's missionary journal, he says that one day he was out in this town of Frederikshavn, and he said he had a meeting with his cousins because they would be the ones that stayed behind. But apparently, I'm just trying to figure out just the basics even.
Right.
As far as, so Jen's father's name was what?
Berthel.
Berthel, okay.
Berthel Christian.
Okay, so
Christensen.
Berthel, Christian, and
Look right here.
his wife, okay.
They emigrated,
got it
and
right.
Jens was the youngest, and I don't know that, I haven't studied it, but he was the baby of the family. Is that
Yours
right?
My father, I don't know.
Your father. He was the youngest.
Okay.
And this is the mother.
All I knew, there was three
No,
of them.
Margaret.
You knew three.
He and his brother and his
And
mother.
this is the one that came to
Okay.
Berthel's the one that came to America?
Going over the horse and buggy over to.
Well,
It's right here, Berthel on the Christian side,
he came as a 10-year-old.
I've not been to Spring
but
City.
with his parents,
I
right?
need to go.
That's a choice to have. You know, they tell me lots
This
of
is-
Spring
Keep
City,
your hand away from your mouth.
California people are telling me they're.
Oh.
But it, put up
This
for
is the
sale
one that I'm
there,
trying to follow, I'm kind of interested in this.
I've got to go
Figure
to
out.
Spring City. I want to go to the cemetery there because that's where the Christensens are buried, is in Spring City.
And we went to that one and we couldn't find him, could we?
You couldn't find them there?
Well, it was raining
Couldn't
and
find-
we
well, we
looked,
couldn't
and,
find a
and I don't
sexton or
know if,
anything.
if you found a sexton and had an address for it, but.
Well, when Grandpa took me down there, he took me to the old cemetery, and we were gonna go down and clean it up
Yeah.
and weed it and everything else. And then 10, 15 years later, longer than that, I guess, my son Kenny and I were going through there, and so we tried to find it. But we ended up at I don't know if the cemetery had changed or if it's a newer cemetery, but
They
now
changed the road.
it's got a little gazebo in the middle, and there's a directory of all the people's names. And in that cemetery, we found your father, which I'd never known about before. So now it looks like there's two different
Oh,
cemeteries
yeah,
that are
and
in
Ephraim there are, and
Yeah.
then Spring City is a one. In fact,
The old
Spring City
Pioneer
was the original one.
Cemetery.
But that's where
college
Grandpa
now.
must have taken me to,
Right.
the one in
Keep
Spring
around
City.
as you're going into the cemetery this way,
Uh-huh.
stay right here on this, to the left.
Is this the one in Spring City?
Yeah, no, that'd be.
The one in Ephraim?
The old one in
Pioneer
Ephraim, is that what
Cemetery,
it's called?
where
Yeah.
all the grandpa. Just go in your road here and take right around here, just like that. And
It's
right
on the
here on
south.
the corner.
It's on the southwest
Right.
corner.
It's,
And they're all grouped within
right.
the spot has been.
In fact, there's a little wire fence around it.
Well,
The
it
college-
changes every year.
Oh, does
Snow,
it?
Snow College, the students now have been cleaning the cemetery.
Cleaning.
Oh.
I mean, there's no flowers or anything that way, but they go down and take the weeds off and that, and you could tell that they've been there. We used to go down with shovels and rakes and, try to clean them off. But the college now has done that.
Well, I know I don't want to take you off your
No, you're
your
not.
path, but I know your focus, you're doing a lot of work on the names, and I'm way back at the beginnings. I'm fascinated at some point to hear from Cleon. I'm just anxious to hear about what it was like growing up. I don't know anything about, and if it doesn't send the wrong message, I just remember Grandpa Christensen one time saying to me, the closest I ever got to it, kind of a little clip of his life growing up, was he just said, our dad didn't give us anything. In fact, I take it back, because I think he gave us a quarter once, and we had to pay it back. And he was talking about, we've heard.
Lamar, that is negative.
I know it, and what I meant by that was he said that they were hardworking, not that they were. He wasn't trying to say that it was a character flaw. He was trying to tell me that there wasn't a lot there, that they were hardworking people, that everybody worked hard to get ahead, those kinds of things. But I know nothing. I mean, I just know zero.
Vera
I've got it.
I apologize.
Vera,
That's all
I know,
right.
but I think Vera talked on a tape. But I told Venice, I don't know whether they'll want it. There's so much negative. She says they didn't even give her a piece of bread and peanut butter. And
Well, my mom the other day too, she said, we listen to all these stories and everybody's laughing and joking, but she said it makes it sound like it dominates the whole thing. So I hope I didn't put a blemish on that. All I was trying to illustrate was how little we know. And we just come into the picture as kids coming up to Utah, and we know that there's a Denzel, we know Uncle Cleon, and you're youngest, so we know you the best, and your kids, and we know Grandpa and Grandma, but we know, other than a family group sheet, other than a name, I don't know anything about it, and I think it's fascinating to find out when he was growing up, just what it was like, and his mom and dad, and when the church comes into the picture as far as how you're raised, and because we got a little glimpse of this recently. Marianne and I were talking about this through my wife's family, is that as I put pieces together, Sue's family's all from Price and Carbon County, and I'm honest, I should go off the record for a second here, but what I got a little glimpse of was that Brigham Young in the late 1800s, as people came in, he sent them out to settle hundreds of areas, and as long as he was alive, he visited the settlements every single year. But there was about a 40 or 50 year block where a lot of these settlements lost contact with the church, and then the kids that were growing up in the next generation, that was a hard time to grow up. I mean, you're settling out here in a really rough area, so I'm just trying to find out a little bit more about what his growing up experience was like. And you go
No,
to it,
that's fine.
but if he
We were
can,
just doing
if he can weave it in, and I
No, sit there.
I want to call it stuff.
No, mother tells me about your dad. She said, that's where you get, see, LeVar and I have them. We're the only two in the family that have these twinkly eyes that shut. His dad had them. Whenever you smile, every picture I have no eyes. And she said that was Grandpa Christensen. And that he had red hair when he was a young man, and that he was a fiddler. He knew how to fiddle, and whenever there was dances, Grandpa Christensen.
Should I
Is
tell you
that
what?
right?
I have the fiddle.
So he truly was a fiddler.
He brought it from
I can
Denmark.
remember
As a
when
young
we moved
boy.
up here to Provo, that out in the old house out there with the steel platform, we had a big room there. They'd roll the carpet back, and I had a bunch of friends come in there, and he would fiddle, and somebody would play the guitar or something, and they'd have the old square dances. Now, that's in my lifetime.
Well, okay, then you know that's
So
true.
he was an old-time fiddler, is what he was.
Well, that's where Mother got her talent for violin.
That's what, I remember that you said that you were baptized in the Manti Temple.
That's right.
How active were your parents in the church? Were they active?
Very inactive.
Very inactive. That's the impression I got.
I personally,
How did
I
they
hate to
not
admit
have
this, but I can't remember
ever going?
ever going to church outside of once with my father to priesthood visit. And I remember how bored I was, a little kid there sitting there, and it didn't mean the darn thing to you. You know how you are when you're a little kid. And I can't ever remember going again.
The thing of it is, though, you were baptized in the Manti Temple, but do you know at
Your old
Mitchell,
baptism will fall. I noticed that when we were down there just this summer. The old baptismal form there in the temple, they've got it in a room by itself now, enclosed in a glass cage. I was baptized in that.
But they even announced it at Mitchell's graduation, that you were the first one or something in the Manti Temple. I'm gonna have to ask
I don't
Holly.
think you-
Holly got some
It was
information,
88.
and they even announced it at Mitchell's baptism. That you were the only one or the first one or
Well,
something. I
Maybe
don't-
the last one, because the temple was dedicated
Yeah,
in
that's what it
1888.
I don't know, Mary Ann, I'm gonna have to ask Holly what
Well,
the
and I know
story was.
I read somewhere, and I wish I'd saved it, but somewhere I got a little news clipping or something where, going back to Thomas Christensen, the first convert of the Christensen line, if I remember right, do you know anything about that?
I don't know.
I read something about like being a part of the Royal Guard or something, of the military or something for, I don't know if it was in Denmark or where, but anyway, it was somebody who was in the military and then trying to figure out how they joined and then how they immigrated, and made the decision to come to America.
Well, it must have,
Sure it's not
his
Thomas
brother,
Clark.
what we called TC,
Oh,
his brother was very religious. Now, my father and his brother was entirely different.
So your
Father was, when he first married my mother, he went out herding sheep. Well, I can remember him talking about, you read your early history about Butch Cassidy and his outlaw gang and stuff like that. He was telling us that the members of Butch Cassidy's outlaw band would come into his sheep camp and get a meal. But they never would sleep in around the sheep camp. They always went back into the cedar someplace and made their bed.
Well, do you remember I'm sorry.
well, that would have been possible because that was down in that area.
That was during the time.
So, do you remember your
my father
grandparents?
herded sheep. That was
Do
his
you remember?
livelihood when they first got married.
I know that you said your dad gave you a little pony.
That's right.
Tell us about that and the carriage and going to see your grandparents in Spring City.
Well, my father, I've always had a horse around me, but my father bought me a little Indian Mustang. I possibly, if you read the early history, one way of capturing a wild horse was to do what they called crease them. And they would shoot them. They couldn't catch them by roping them or running them down, so they would stand off with a rifle and they would try to shoot them just below the rim of the neck of the mane, and what they called creasing. And it was actually like hitting you across your vertebra, and it would stun them, and then they'd run up towards your capture. This little horse he bought, that's the way they caught it, someone caught it. He bought it from a horse trainer down there at Kingston. He bought it for me. And that horse was a freak, because any time when I was riding you could be riding on a dead run on somebody shoot a cat pistol, we'd put on the brakes and I piled off that one once because I could stick it, it'd stop. Just
That's
been
wonderful.
shooting. But, like you say, I was frankly born and raised on a horse that way, you know. I was a little when
Okay, what about the carriage that,
well, like I was said before, my grandmother lived in Spring City. Now you drive over, a 10-minute drive from me from Spring City. That time I can distinctly remember, we get up early in the morning, it's this little Mustang mare of mine. It was broke to the harness. We had one of those fancy buggies. We hitched that horse to the buggy and we
They
went
call
over to
Surrey.
Spring City
Surrey.
and had Sunday dinner with my grandmother over there and came back. And I'll never forget how tired that little horse was coming back pulling that cart or buggy there all the way back. So that was
so when you went to visit her, it would be what, your dad and your mother and you?
that's right.
Everybody else was gone,
He was the baby,
the baby.
Yeah.
spoiled brat.
Now, I had the impression, right or wrong, that when Grandpa and Luzon were married in the temple, which was pretty unusual, even many of her brothers and sisters were not. But that when he moved to Provo, he was somehow instrumental in getting Denzel and your father to move to Provo. Is that not, were they
Yeah,
there first?
he even got his dad a
Okay,
job.
I was
at
gonna
Steel
say,
Plant.
tell us about how you moved out of Ephraim to Provo.
It was through my, through your.
Through LeVar.
grandpa.
Through LeVar.
Marianne?
He was a school teacher, and I was laying in bed last night thinking about, I don't know, he taught down in Manaway
He did.
and possibly some other place.
He,
I don't
in
know.
Fountain Green, he went from Manaway down to Fountain Green, 'cause that's where Mother was born.
And then he
moved
came
to
up here
Provo.
some way, I can't remember how, but he was a school teacher up here in the teaching school in Provo. And across the street from where he lived was the superintendent that was building, that was in charge of the building of the
I didn't know that.
Ironton Steel Plant.
Oh.
And through the friendship through there, I could tell you how they got acquainted, but I can't do it here. But they-
Drinking.
What?
They got acquainted drinking.
All right, if you said it, I did.
Yeah, Grandpa was a drunk.
Now, back in those days, why, everybody made home brew, what they called home brew. It was during Prohibition time. And it was customary, you walked into a house and the way of friendship was, well, you brought out the home brew and everybody had a glass of beer. Well, this Watson, what was the chief engineer for Ironton Steel Plant, loved this home brew. Your grandpa knew how to make real good home brew. Everybody had their own recipe for it.
That's true.
And everybody tried to outdo the other one. They tried rice, they tried everything. Making a real good, tangy home brew. Well, he and this Watson got real buddy-buddy on it, and through him, well, he got a job for my father, or your great-grandfather, to move up from Ephraim, and he got a job as a carpenter. He was one of what you call a jackleg carpenter, just I'd hate to have him build a home for me now, the way they build homes, but he could nail a board together and saw a board.
I thought he was night watchman.
What?
I thought he was night
That was
watchman.
later on.
And then Denzel came up too. Denzel
That-
Brooke,
that,
didn't
They got Dennis
That's
job.
So-
what they came out.
I was gonna say, was Uncle Den married? Were they living down there?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
Yeah, Dennis Dorff lived in
I
Ephraim.
know.
too.
They
Uncle
lived
Dan
in-
and, if I remember right, both my father and Uncle Dan was working on the section gang for the old Sanpete Railroad, which was a pretty good job. You stop and realize down there, when I was growing up as a kid, there was only one industry in Ephraim, and that was a pea vinery down west of town. And that was a summer job. And I've often wondered how everybody lived and existed. Here we're going here, you've got a job, I've got a job, and everybody's got a steady job. Back in those days, there was no steady job. You worked here, you worked there, and all over. And this pea vinery was the only summer job in existence for the whole town that I know of. The rest of it was sheep herding, farming, and everything pertaining to that agricultural life.
And I didn't know he worked on the railroad.
Yeah, I can remember as I almost died to have this membrane melt,
Yes.
Membranous.
membrane, but I got that, and there was about 15 of us young kids that got into Ephraim. And I have the distinct honor of being the only one that survived that
Membranous tube.
And I remember the doctors coming up with silver tubes. They wanted to put it down my throat because I couldn't breathe through that. But I never left the house for one solid year there. And they would sit me in front of the stove. We had an old pot-bellied heater, wrapped in blankets, homemade quilt, put a chunk of alum. You know what alum is? How dry that is. You ever go
Make
somewhere?
pickles.
Put that in my mouth, and I'd sit there and just sweat blood out. And from that heater, they claimed that's why I was safe. I think I'm too mean to die.
I think so too. And that was, I didn't hear it, that's diphtheria that you had, or?
Membranous croup.
Oh, yeah,
Yep, it's
membrane
just-
croup.
Membranous.
Yeah.
Membrane.
Croup.
And I think they call it pneumonia. They call it pneumonia and other stuff
No, there's
now.
still croup now. There's still croup
Yeah.
now, but they just give them a shot of
Antibiotic.
prednisone and antibiotic, and they're fine.
I see you were a nurse, weren't you, Marianne?
This
Okay.
was
You would
fatal.
know.
I can't remember whether it was 12 or 14 kids
It
down.
doesn't,
in
wouldn't
that
surprise
time
me if that's.
With them. And like you say, they wouldn't allow me outside the house for one solid year. So I can remember distinctly my father taking me out of the house first time.
Well, Venice wants to know how you met your mother, or her asking, how did you?
When you were growing up then, what do you remember your dad doing as a first job? He was a carpenter when he came up to Ironton, but did he do any of that down in Ephraim?
Not as a
So
profession.
what did he do in Ephraim? He worked on the railroad?
Oh, he got, like I just got through saying, he done spare.
Just
spare
odd jobs?
You have to realize back in those days, everybody had a cow, everybody had
Yeah.
a bunch of chickens. Everybody raised 2 or 3 pork to survive. Everybody had a garden. So you're practically living off of your own substance.
And the reason they're there is because if you go back far enough, they were settled there.
That's
You know,
right.
The pioneers came here and branched out, so you kind of jump into the middle of the history and you find that one of your ancestors was self-sufficient, but as far as if they were to ask how we got here, somebody before them had a reason to come to Ephraim and settle, and the story of that area is the story of whatever ward. I know Grandpa has a little book called The History of the Chester Ward. Was that the ward that they
That
lived in?
would be your grandma.
That would be,
Grandma.
That would be your grandma's side,
Okay.
the Chester.
Grandma was the
Spring
grandpa.
City, your grandfather and grandmother, Christensen, settled in Spring City.
How
The
did they?
Andersons settled in Ephraim. They were sent there by Brigham Young, the Andersons were. And how Mary Ann got there, I don't know, because she came singly. But Niels Peter was sent by Brigham Young.
Okay, that was gonna be my question. Where did the church start? Did they come over for the church, or
Right.
just,
All of
they did come for
They
the
must have
church?
all
Or
been
did
everyone,
converts.
everyone,
I know,
your grandfather was a
my
convert.
grandmother, they were converts.
They were the first ones in their family, and they moved. Even though
Rena.
Denmark had
What was distinguishing about that was that my grandmother's mother, those two left Denmark and left their family to come over here to settle
Well,
in
now,
Ephraim.
see, that answer, for your grandmother, that would be Margaretta. This is Anderson.
Yeah.
I can't find where her husband died, so that
I
makes
don't-
sense. I found where they were baptized, and it's not any of the dates she got, guys. I found where she was baptized in 1865
In Denmark?
in Denmark, and I found the branch and the place, but can't find anything about her. It was a third husband.
Well, it's interesting, and
A third
that
husband?
in Denmark, some of these converts left their mate and came over here. If their mate particularly didn't join the church.
That's right. And I
And
haven't
see,
found.
this could be the case that happened
See,
with this woman.
I've been looking for a death date for this man before she came. But when you say that she left family, then it's very likely.
It's very
that-
likely she left her
I don't
husband
know,
there.
too,
We have a couple of,
They
in our
left the family, the rest of the family,
handwritten
in fact,
patriarchal blessings
your
and
grandpa
quill
before
and pen.
went over there and
And
met the
one of
other
them, I
side.
think, is for this.
Okay, then I will find him now then. I've been looking too early.
It's either Margarita, who are the ones that we have the patriarchal blessings from? I told you about
It
that.
would be Mary Ann and Margaretta.
Okay, and I took it downtown to the church office a number of years ago, the genealogy library, and I asked if somebody could translate it for me. And he said that it wasn't a very good translation. He said it was okay. But he said, come back tomorrow and I'll have it for you. But when he handed it to me, and this was things that Grandpa had been saving, and he said, the thing that's interesting about this is he said, the person who received this blessing received it in English, but they couldn't speak English, so they had to have it translated into Danish, and now you're trying to get it back into English. So it was a Danish colony. I mean, everybody, all the Scandinavian people were sent down there. And
There were two places that Brigham Young sent them because he thought they could stand the cold. I mean, and Denmark is more temperate than here, but one was Cache County and the other was Sanpete, Sevier County. And so, you know, if they came from a certain community, and as far as I can tell, everyone from this all-board conference
Have you ever
went to
gone up
Sanpete
to,
County.
have you ever gone up to Corbin here to this pageant they put on in the
I
fall?
have not.
We went
It's,
there
it's
2 or 3
fun,
times.
it's fun. I like it better than Manti.
Which
It's
one
just
is
about
it?
the same thing,
Oh, we can tell
only
them
it's
that
out in the
about
Down at
later. Let's-
Carbondale.
Oh,
Stick-
Carbondale.
Corbin was settled by people from Ephraim, Manti, and down there, it come up there in Southern California.
Oh, okay.
I never knew that
This is
till
your
we
day.
heard this on the pageant.
Now, what about your mother? She died in 1930 something, didn't she?
No, no, she was later than that, because Larry was 9 months old when Grandma Christensen died, and Larry was born in 1938.
Okay, so
She would have died 1938 or 39, 38.
She was died 1938 or 39, didn't she?
Yeah.
Well, Larry was 9 months old when Grandma Christensen died, and Larry was born in 38. He was born August,
She died in 39.
so it would be 39.
So your grandfather died 10, 15 years earlier than that.
Died before we were married.
When he was watching it out here.
Now, did she come up from Ephraim to live up here?
She lived in Provo, yeah.
So she lived in...
530 on 4th South.
No,
Little
see,
house.
We came up to Ephraim and moved to Provo.
Okay.
And from Provo, we moved twice to Provo there, just rented the house I did. He got an opportunity to go out there on the south end of the Ironton Steel Plant and be a watchman.
But that wasn't for you to live.
The
Yes,
carpenter
they
job-
lived
Oh,
out,
you
they
lived
lived.
there.
The carpenter's job
On
fizzled out
Springdale
on him,
Highway.
so he got the job of watchman, which is actually a better job. And they deputized him, made him a deputy sheriff there, $1 a year man actually, so that he could watch the south end of the steel plant there. They had the canal, the steel plant canal come in furnishing the water. And they had the canal, what they call the canal riders, would go back on every hour
Oh,
and
okay.
patrol that canal. But they had my father as a deputy sheriff over there, and he was kind of overseeing the south end of the property over there with the authority of the sheriff's office back.
So you actually lived there then?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
That was the happiest time of my life. It was kind of a rough life to go, and I used to, not reminiscent, but there was a man by the name of McDougall that owned a herd of sheep up opposite Canyon. You know the McDougalls, so I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yeah.
Up Robinson. And they had a big slag dump that was there over the south end of the property, where your freeway goes down from Fort South down. And this McDougall, every fall, hired me and give me $1 a day and furnished me a horse. And he'd bring 50 or 75 head of sheep over there, mostly bucks. That was his buck herd. And I would herd his bucks over there, and back at this house that we were living in, there was a large area there that was under fence. So it was a fence krill. And I would herd those sheep around that slag dump down in the marshland all day long, and then bring them into the krill at night. And gee, it was that was during the, it was heaven on earth for me, because I enjoyed that type of life. So.
What do you remember about your childhood with Uncle LeVar and the brothers and sisters? I mean,
I
there's
never had
17.
any childhood with him in
I was
Egypt.
going to say, there were 17 years between you and Uncle LeVar, so that's quite a stretch.
There was no
Hey, just let him be, will you?
there was nothing between us when we lived in Ephraim. And when we got up here, I can remember him taking me on a bicycle, and he was delivering, especially delivering letters. He was with me on the handlebars of the bicycle, and wheeled me around Rome, delivering a special delivery letter. That's my
So
life.
how old were you when you moved to Provo?
I was in the 3rd grade.
Okay.
And now I'll tell you something that has often amazed me. They brought me up, I was in the 3rd grade, and that little town of Ephraim, and their teaching, I was much more advanced in my learning than they were here in the old major school up here, that they skipped me from the 3rd to the 5th grade. I'll never forget how hard it was on the 5th grade to because I missed so much in the fourth grade, you know, and I had to pick it up as we went along. The kids knew angles and the arithmetic that I didn't know anything about. But I did skip the fourth grade, not because of my intelligence so much as it was just the education of a small town over Marshtown. That often amazed me.
Well, it shouldn't.
So Uncle LeVar was married before you moved to Provo, is that
Oh,
correct?
yeah,
Okay.
He taught school. He taught school, and like you say, man, always
When you moved to Provo, were you the only child still at home?
Now, wait a minute. No, both Aunt Leora and Aunt Vera and I, there's three of us.
Are you recording?
They never got married till we moved up to Provo.
So, now, when you were out in Ironton, were the girls married?
Describe to us where you lived in Provo. I know you.
I don't think,
You did already?
You just said there were two places they were in.
they either, when we moved to Ironton, I believe that they were married. They got married when we lived in Provo.
In Provo.
I think when we
Well,
moved down,
poor
it was his
Sal.
mother and I, and that was during Depression, and my sister Vera, I remember his brother-in-law Byron, he bought a herd of sheep out there, and he paid $35 a head for a herd of sheep from his father. And within a year, he couldn't give them away for $3 a head. So he had to stay, the only way to keep the sheep was to stay with them. So we brought my sister and two little boys into my mother, and
You stayed with the sheep.
he stayed with the sheep.
What about your mom? What do you remember about her?
She loved to play slot.
I
Was
know
she-
she was just.
Now, see, my mother always played cards, okay? She's taught all of my kids how to play cards, and she said she got it from her grandmother.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to pin down which grandmother it was that
Be
liked to play
Messina.
cards.
It would be Messina.
She know every kind of rummy there was.
We came from a card-playing family.
Oh, okay.
Born with a deck
Well,
of cards.
tell me,
Every-
didn't you say that your mother and what, Orson and Andrew, and they needed another partner, so you were the fourth
No,
partner, or who was it?
It was my mother, after my father died.
But
we
he
moved
died up
here
in
to
Provo,
North
didn't he?
Second North in Provo, and we lived in a duplex. My mother and I, and Dale Larson and his family lived in another duplex. And Dale Larson was the ex-chief from Ike, known my mother all the time. So to play a game of slup, I needed the third man to play a game of slup. So they taught me when I was, I imagine I was only about 10, 11, 12 years old, but taught me how to play slup. So we'd sit there and play slup, and me and Dale Larson, mother. That's
Well, it
why-
was up here in Provo then.
That would be.
Provo, yeah.
Tell us what memories you have of Ephraim as a child that maybe would be common, things that you did, your life and whatever that would be common to Uncle Lavar too.
Well, this hits it home because I can remember as a kid, there was no paved street in Ephraim whatsoever. It was all just dusty roads. And the light poles would be running down the middle of the street, one light we have. And I can remember as a little kid, we always go out there and play Run My Sheepy Run and Duck on the Rock, and just games like that that was
Street games.
relevant to the time I was living in. You kids have never heard of it now, never played it, but I remember we had those flying, you ever see the flying grasshopper, the crackles as they fly? We'd pull up these sunflower stalks and chase those flying grasshoppers around, swatting those. We have to make our own games up on something like that. So, I can distinctly remember as a kid that you'll never have an experience. Everybody had a dirt cellar. And I've often wondered if here we can go buy a piece of meat any time of year you want it. Back in the days when I was a kid, you butchered your pigs in the fall, really, you remember that?
Yeah, we used
You
to butcher
butchered
them
your
here.
beef and everything in the fall because there was no refrigeration, so you either cured it with salt or smoked it or
Hang the
froze it.
hams out in the chicken coop.
Or in the
So,
cellar.
but I can remember opening the door and the cellar was built up, say possibly 4 feet above the ground, and then a sloping roof covered with dirt, so it was just like an igloo. And I can remember walking over the door and walking down in that cellar and have that aroma of that smoked ham and smoked baits and all the smoked meat. They would hang them on the ridgepole. I remember that yet. It was a wonderful time to think about something like that. You don't see it now.
I think you mentioned before, but public schools, did he go all the, did he?
Yeah, tell us about your schooling.
Your public schooling, how it was organized, I mean, all the way through, like we have junior high, high school, or was it?
What, I went to grade school there was no kindergarten, I remember. I never went to kindergarten. You went from 1st to 6th, that was your grade school. 6 to 9 was your junior high, from 9 to 12 was your senior.
Did they have junior high and high school in Ephraim? Of course, you moved, so.
I don't know, 'cause I
So
left
he
when I was
moved
in
away.
third grade.
He moved, he said when he was in the 3rd grade, and when he came up here, they double promoted him because he was ahead of what
So
they
you
were doing.
graduated from Provo High School then? Was that the old one on Center Street that my dad talked about?
I went to
Where
the
he
major,
taught.
went to the major school, and then they had the junior high and the senior high down on Third Western Center on.
Well, I went to
Provo.
Razor School.
Was Grandpa
Did you
teaching
really?
at the school when you were going
He
to?
taught me in the high school.
See, 'cause
Taught
I've-
you math,
I've
huh?
got a year.
That was the hardest time, because I had to keep my grades up, so I almost have went through all
He
the
didn't cut you
schools
any
up to
slack, huh?
up to the senior high with a straight A average on it.
What year did you graduate from high school?
Oh, gee, too many years.
The reason-
I've
reason
got a
I asked-
picture of that.
The reason I ask is because I have I have Grandpa's yearbooks from Provo High School, the green and white, for like 1927, 28, whatever. Would that have been?
I graduated about 1932 somewhere.
So those would be pictures of you then, would be in there.
I
So
got a
right before
picture
the-
of his high school, but
Right before the Depression? So you went through the Roaring Twenties and all that? You went right through what they call the Roaring
So-
Twenties?
Yeah.
Well, if you've got
roaring my
those,
foot.
if you've got those
Roared
yearbooks,
all
they'd
right.
probably like to look at those.
Yeah, that might be the box on that.
So what do you remember about your mother? I have one picture of her, and she seems stout. I guess that's
Did
where I
she
get
like
mine.
to-
She wasn't, but it was the dresses, Mary Ann, that she
Oh, was
wore.
it? Oh.
Cheryl, I don't know, they always wore these big, but Grandma wasn't petite, Grandma wasn't
What
stout.
did she cook for you that you liked?
Soup.
Well, we always had a pot of soup, that's
Oh,
what I don't like.
I
soup to
didn't
this
ever
day.
know that Grandma didn't
We
have,
always
when you
had a
went
pot
there,
of soup on
she
the back
always
of
had
the
some
stove.
kind, and the kinds of soup that she had, I wished I had the recipe. She had a cabbage soup, and I don't even like cabbage. But the cabbage, oh, she made good soup, and always a pot of coffee.
My mother tells me about going down to your parents' place, to Grandpa and Grandma Christensen's when they were still in Ephraim. And she spent all day long scouring Grandpa's coffee pot, because she said it was so black. And she worked her little heart out. She must have been 8 or 9, she said. And I scrubbed that clean, and she said, I've never seen my grandfather so mad, because he had spent years getting it to just have just the right flavor. And
Well,
she thought
if there
she
was a coffee pot.
doing the right thing by scouring it and getting it all clean, getting all this black crud out of it. That's what she said.
Well,
What-
You
what
ruined
other-
my coffee pot.
What other kinds of foods what you remember with fond memories then, besides soup, that your mother fixed?
She made head's cheese,
Fried meat and potatoes.
and she had head's cheese, she made head's cheese, she taught me how to make head's cheese.
What's the
Out of
rule
order.
that I remember that?
It was your
That's your
basic food that, everybody had.
Meat and potatoes.
It's like you say, you lived off the ground, and in the winter, while you had salt pork and old salty bacon.
Venice
and
wanted to know about the
potatoes.
wool poles. She taught me how to make that. You know, you lay out your flank, and you have to have some lean meat, put some onion, and salt and pepper and sage, and roll it up and tie it.
Oh, that's.
You have to use,
That's something.
I think I've still got out home an old railroad, piece of railroad tie that used it for a weight to weight it down, and then you slice it as lunch meat. It's good. But
Well,
Grandma taught me to make
this,
that.
What Ella is talking about is you take the carcass of a sheep and you have your
Flank.
flank here.
That's what I said.
And you can't use a flanking or anything because it's just flank. So what they would do was kept that flank out, and then you'd have, tell her what do you put in. You put
Well, you'd
some
have to, your
heavily-
good lean
heavily
meat, you'd
salted-
have to have some lean pieces to lay on this flank.
heavily salted
An
pieces
onion.
of meat, salt, pepper, meat,
An
and
onion.
spices or something.
Chopped onion,
Chopped onion.
and then she
then
put a
you
little
roll
sage.
it up and make a ball out of it and sew it. She had a big sewing needle and
I still
she'd
got the
sew
needle.
the flank together so it was around, just almost like a baseball, only twice as large.
Oh, Chris, it wasn't round, it was this
You
way.
put it on the
like a
plate,
jelly.
put
Yeah.
another plate on
And then
top
you
of
sew
it.
it.
She's talking about a tie, and you put the heavy weight on the top, and that would.
Piece of old railroad tie.
Oh.
You
That-
first
I
you
don't know that
boil
it's still out in
Oh,
the
okay,
shop.
that's how you cook
Yeah,
it.
you boil it, and then while it was still hot.
I don't believe
you
a
put it
flat
on
iron
the
would be
plate,
heavy
you
enough.
put
You'd
the
have to
weight
have
on
something
it.
that's
Oh,
really,
that would
press that
compress
hot.
it.
You do it
So it
warm.
would hang together, then you could slice it off, and you had that, it's delicious.
He still, he wanted to do it, we just bought a lamb. He wanted me to make roast beef. I said, no.
Go buy bologna.
Well, but you'd have to
Hey,
have the
LeVar,
chunk.
what kind of questions do you have for him?
Well, I just wondered about grandmother, because mother, your grandmother, your mother, because she says grandmother, maybe it was because when mother remembered her, she was old and not well, but she says she just always seemed really quite cross.
Oh, she was fun-loving.
No,
Was she?
no,
Oh.
I
She loved to
think she
play
had no
cards, and she,
impression on that.
no, she was happy, really a happy.
She just loved
She
to get
wasn't
out.
near as ornery as
She
Chris.
tried to talk, she and I, to take her up, and she loved to go up the canyon
She says,
and
oh,
have
Cleon, I'll buy
silver rolls and
I'll buy the
a cup of
rolls if
coffee,
you'll take
huh?
me up and we'll go up and have coffee. We'd have a gas stove and go up the canyon and have coffee
Oh,
and sweet rolls.
Did
but-
she crochet or sew or anything that way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got things out there, I'll
We used to
show you.
laugh at her, you know, the kids would give her a dress for a Christmas gift or a birthday gift or something.
She'd put it away for
And she'd put
Ephraim.
it away till she
She
went
always
back to
wanted to go
Ephraim.
back to Ephraim.
She always had the idea she was gonna move back to Ephraim. When
Yeah.
she died, I guess she had half a dozen dresses that she put away.
I don't even
for
know who
Ephraim.
got the dresses, how about that?
Okay, now for the myths. My mother said that there was someone in the family who, when times were lean, would go down to the local saloon and deal cards. Is that true or false? Do you know of anyone in your family that did that? Must not be true.
Well, you know, we
I
just don't know
about the
about it.
saloon.
Well, that's, that was the first question. Where would they go to, have it be a
I've
saloon?
never known of a saloon in
In
Ephraim.
Ephraim, okay, well, see.
Okay, then it's false.
Well,
Okay, go ahead.
you know how you grew up with these things that, just wonder.
This old Andrew, now maybe she got the idea here, he was in Sharpie.
He was a
when he was
cheek.
young enough to be mentally alert. And like you say, he was quite a chord player. And that was during Depression down there. And the sheep was almost bankrupt, the sheep industry and everything, and everybody was going on a shoestring. And that's when they first started raising turkeys down in Sanpete County. And so some of those old turkey raisers would come up to Andrew up there, and he would have his home brew. And instead of making it like your grandpa and the rest of them were really good drink, he just brewed it in open open crock. I tried it once and it practically gagged me. I don't know how they did it, but it didn't have no warmth to it. So these guys, and he'd get him playing chords, they'd come up there and play chords with him
And
up
cheat
there.
him.
And he'd clean them on the chords and some of them
Even-
there on top of it.
Even in this history
Oh,
of
Well,
Vera,
that's where
did.
it came
That's
from.
where that
That,
That's
uh,
the one.
he would cheat the young
Like
kids.
I say, he was a Sharpie on it.
Did you ever read that Vera, did you?
Okay, that's where that one
Well,
came from.
That's where it
Well,
come
I'm
from.
glad to know that, you know, because you hate to think that your
That's so
grandmother
perfect.
is kind of grumpy, so.
No, Grandma was not. Grandma was the sweetest.
Tell us
Nature.
about when your dad died. You said he got cancer. You were how old?
I was going to high school.
18,
17 or so?
18, about 18. His dad died. But they lived out in Ironton then. They lived out about the steel plant, Ironton steel plant.
Did they ever talk about how they met and married?
No, I never did go.
Hmm.
You know what, I've kicked my bottom back seat many times. Your grandpa used to go down to Mayfield, and that's where the first wife's family went.
Oh, I didn't know she'd gone down there. Okay.
Well, that's, before.
Would go down and
since we lived
visit.
out
He would go to
Mayfield,
Mayfield
he
and
used to
visit.
go down to Mayfield all the time.
Then he must
And
have
he
been
looked
there.
up these half-shirt relatives of ours
Half-assed
and
ones.
met with them, and I wasn't interested. I thought about now going down there, but I don't even know who to look for.
Well,
I don't know their names or anything else.
Probably none of them gone, and none of them alive.
What?
I say they probably none of them alive
that would remember
that
grandpa.
would know, yeah.
I really enjoy it. I just kind of think chronologically, and I kind of like filling in the blanks because, like I said, I've got all these random little bits and pieces, and we're just so hungry for information that we lock on to every little thing we can get. But it's been helpful just to, even though Uncle Cleon's the youngest, I know my dad always spoke with just real tenderness for Uncle Cleon. I see now that there's about a 17-year age difference.
Well, he was just like a father to Chris.
Yeah,
He really
and
was.
so my dad just loved you because
Well,
he could.
your dad and I, we always got along pretty good.
Well, you touched me deeply. I stopped by your home a few months back, and again, one of these little precious morsels that you get. But Uncle Cleon and Aunt Della were telling me we're just in there, you know, in your new home, your lovely new home, and it's thrilling, I think, to see that you can be on the same property that you spent so many years and have a new place there. But he told me that my dad, right before he passed away, that he was on his way up to the hospital, optimistically thinking that a kidney transplant was going to solve his medical problems. But even though he didn't have a lot of time, the one thing he wanted to do was to stop and see Uncle Cleon before he went to the
He did.
hospital. I didn't know that, and Uncle
He did.
Cleon told me that of course, here he is to us. You know, Uncle Cleon was my dad's uncle, but he was Uncle Cleon to everybody in our family. We didn't make any distinction between for how that would all work. But he told me, he just said, I can still see your dad, both Dylan, he said, just coming up our back stairs and sitting there in the kitchen with us and reminiscing and saying that he was going to see us again soon, and he passed away. But it meant a lot to me to know that when my dad's time was short, that on the short list of things he wanted to do was to go see Uncle Cleon.
He had a, what is it, a colostomy? Is that
Uh-huh.
what
You
he
go,
did?
you voted
And
up
there-
from the hospital?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
called us from the hospital, Lamar did.
Did he?
Well, I remember
He did.
Mother always saying, I refuse to call you Uncle Cleon. You'll always be my big brother Chris.
Well, he has gone by Chris all the time. It's not been, his mother always said Cleon. And I think Vera said Cleon. She always would say Cleon. And I thought, well, who's Cleon?
You know, and I know too, I mean, where we're coming from, one of the reasons we're all here doing this, at least speaking for Mary Ann and I, I'm sure, is that it inspires me. I sit here and find myself looking at you, and you look ahead and think someday my kids might be talking to me like this, you know, wanting to know these things. But I understand and know that the church, it's the gospel that makes us, that really prompts us to do a lot of this. And I just look around and I look at the wonderful signs of the faith of the gospel that are in this home and everything else. And yet I know that the church has grown. I'm sitting here thinking about last conference with President Hinckley, and I'm listening to all this, and I think back, you know, we all marvel at the handcart pioneers of the faith, but people stop the story right there and then they just jump ahead to the jet age. But part of the challenge of the pioneers was to live that first 50 to 100 years in these little settlements. When you talk about, you know, living down there and not knowing what the church was like, I know in the Provost Cemetery where a lot of the Christensens are buried, that when you first pull into the cemetery, there's Jesse Knight has a large spire there, and Jesse Knight, they have a building at BYU, the Jesse Knight building. But his story, he was the founder of First Security Bank, but his story in church history is that he was like a lot of the kids. He grew up here like, what are we here for, and who brought us here, and why are we in this forsaken place? And everybody had to find their faith along the way, eventually. Everybody had a different set of circumstances that eventually gave them their faith and their testimony. I find myself, when you talk about those street games, I find myself wondering just how many people were in the community, how many of the kids in the school were LDS, how many, you know, and everybody's on a different progression. I mean, I imagine that some of the kids maybe are going to church and some are not, but they're probably talking to each other like they do today, back and forth. I mean, but one of my questions is with my grandpa, I know at the funeral when Grandpa was at his funeral, Clyde Sangren spoke at the funeral. And he did a very touching thing. He said he was his grandpa's bishop when he called him on his mission. And as I understand it, he very tactfully alluded to it, but he basically, I got the picture that one of Grandpa's word of wisdom habits was on display, I guess, because he went by the post office and said, I went down and I said, LeVar, you know, what would you think about going on a mission? And I think Grandpa in his heart of hearts, you know, jumped at the chance to go, but it probably along the way in life had settled into a comfortable version of the church that he just kind of, you know, with the hard life that you grew up with, is that it's pretty easy to arrive at the point where you believe in your heart and that's good enough. And I think I'm guessing that there was a lot of people like that. I mean, I've heard people today, they'll say, well, I don't live it, but I've never denied it, you know.
That's
and
a pretty general practice earlier in the church.
Pretty general practice. And
very
so,
lax on word of wisdom.
Well, I
Yeah.
asked Mother about it. I said, Mom, you know, how on earth did you, you know, how did Grandma take all of you kids, you know, to church? So we never went. I don't remember my mother ever taking me to church, ever.
and yet my dad was young like Cleon.
Until I was about 12 when she married my stepfather, but, you know, she was a single mother
Well, you
and so forth.
stop and figure.
She said
it's
you
a
didn't
different
take
type of
kids
life
when they were
altogether.
baptized.
It demanded your...
Here we're all, like I was just said before, here where each one has a job or has had a job all their life. But back in those days, now Bruno's father had his own business here. I guess the Gammons has always had their, haven't they, frankly? But back in a little town like Ephraim, in Spring City, and Ronite, well, like I say, it was a job here, a job there, and 90% of the time they weren't even in town to be.
Well, most of your pursuit there wasn't out to make a living. It was just to help each other and survive. And you survived, you raised your own food, and you probably spent 80% of your time doing that, and the rest of the time you were helping other people do their thing.
And if you could help them out,
Yeah.
you would.
Did you see any positive changes in Grandpa and Grandma when they came back from their missions? I mean, I know looking back we could be hard on them and say, well, they were, but I think I've kind of always had the attitude that from a gospel standpoint, it looks like, with the exception possibly of that middle group that had such a hard time when they first came here. I mean, maybe you got the faith of the pioneer that came across the ocean and got here, and maybe you've got a couple generations where they're wondering. I read the other day where Elder Maxwell says, he says, we read in the scriptures that we all shouted for joy in the pre-existence, but today when life is hard, we wonder what all the shouting was about. You know, and I think maybe sometimes people wonder about that, but Grandpa and Grandma, I know from our standpoint and our family side that I think I shared with you, I intended to bring it today and I went looking for it. I've got the video, but I couldn't find the right clip, but it's pretty precious on our side, as I'm sure this will be for all of you, and you've got a lot more. We have a total of about 3 minutes of Grandpa on film. You're going to have a lot more, but I had a little home movie camera before they came out with camcorders that my father-in-law gave us, a little 3.5-minute spool, and when I graduated from BYU in '77, so as we were leaving, I stopped by Grandpa's home in Mapleton, and Grandma had died in '74 when I was on my mission. So I asked Grandpa, and I said, Grandpa, I'm here with this camera. We only have 3.5 minutes on this spool, and normally back then we would, you know, you'd be so afraid you didn't have 2 hours on a tape. So you'd chop it up and it'd get real herky-jerky because you didn't dare let it just run. So I said, Grandpa, I don't want it to be herky-jerky. This is all we have. So I'm just going to let it run. And whatever you want to be remembered for, this is it, you know. So he got up by that little chair I used to sit in there off of the kitchen, around the corner there. And he goes over to that cabinet of books that he has. And he reaches up, and I know right where he's going, and he grabs this. This is his missionary journal. And he pulls it down, and he opens it up. He says, okay, go ahead and film. And I filmed him for that 3.5 minutes, and he wanted to talk about his mission to Denmark. And that was a slice of his life when he felt like that he was living closest to his heart. You know, and I know when he comes home, I look at these other pictures. I stumbled onto this one here, and I brought the wrong box. I have a whole other box I wanted to show you. But that's just, you know, after his mission, you're seeing all the fishing at Strawberry and all the different things, you know. But
he taught gospel doctrine class in Mapleton because I was in his class.
Well, this last summer, although I've had this journal for 20-some years, I thought it was hard to read, and I went down and I read it page for page, you know, and it really touched me a lot. And Grandma too, to see the wonderful. And then Anna Polson called me the other day, and she was one of their converts. And you know, here Grandma she had her own physical challenges and the illnesses that she had, but talks about making cakes and rolls and jam and playing the organ and all these things that she was doing to be a good sister that was helping Grandpa. But in here, that's what he wanted to talk about. I guess even though there's an age difference, I'm wondering, I guess, Cleon, is that, did you see any changes for the positive, I guess? Did you and Grandpa ever have, later in life, did he ever share his testimony with you, or did he talk to you about the gospel at all?
No.
He's too busy talking about other things.
No, not between the two of them.
Yeah.
I don't think, they're both bullheaded, Lamar, and I think that would probably, I'm sure he did, but no.
I'm wondering
but
if you saw any positive growth, I guess, after he came back from his mission, is what I'm thinking. Here, I'm thinking because I'm turned off and you're on, aren't you? Oh, I'm sorry.
What else would you like to share about your early years, Dad?
What do you want to share about your early years?
Do you remember grandparents? You talk about going to your grandmother Christensen's. Did you ever know your grandmother Anderson?
I knew her better than I did Grandma Christensen, because we lived right next door to her.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I can remember at Christmas time when she was old and feeble, that she would actually come down with Orson and Andrew, who had gone to her, and come down and bring her Christmas gifts in. She, in our family, I never knew until I was married to Della here that you never got your gifts till Christmas Day. We always got them on Christmas Eve. That was our Christmas for Christmas.
What did she give you for Christmas? What was your Christmas like?
In those days, very little.
I'm sure.
Something that was homemade, usually some.
I see how you give to your kids here at Christmas time, and it's almost sacrilegious to me, because back then, why, if I got one or two gifts, why?
Didn't your dad whittle something for you kids? He would whittle. I would love to have had he made a bird in a cage, but Vera got all, what did he want with it? But she got all of his, the things that Grandpa
One
whittled.
of the best gifts I ever got for Christmas was one of those little keyboards. You can
That
still
you
buy
play,
'em.
yeah, that the kids,
You
you
can
can
play?
Little metal
xylophone.
plates on it, you
Oh,
can tap.
Little
yeah,
xylophone.
Gee, I was in my height of glory when I got that for Christmas. That was really
I
a
saw
wonderful gift.
the little bird cage and the bird that he would.
So did you get a traditional orange? Was an orange a treat
No.
at Christmas? You
There
didn't
was
get
no
an orange?
oranges in Ethan.
That's what I wondered. Well, you know,
I never,
our fruits
I
we
can't
gave you
remember
right.
ever seeing an orange in Ethan until I got up here to Provo.
But they had the big old kettles of peach jam going. They had
They had,
and plum,
talking
plum
about
jam.
food, you had your old plums, what they call blue
That's
plums.
Potawatomi.
And you had your green gauges,
Okay.
and you had your Potawatomis. And that was about the only type of
You could make jelly,
of
you
fruit
could make
that you
jam.
had. In the winter, I can remember a fish peddler. Every winter, a fish peddler would come through pulling a box sled, what they call a box sled, full of fish, and with big carp, I'd imagine, going up and down peddling these fish through the streets.
And all those things from the,
People
probably
running
like
out
this
buying
is what
fish.
the-
well, that's
Still
interesting
supposed to
about
be
no
pretty
oranges. You know, we
good
just take it
organized.
so for granted.
Yeah,
that
They
they-
so
didn't
they
work
would get
out
here.
for her.
But you had no, there was no indoor plumbing at all. We had a hydrant, what they call a hydrant, out to the side of the house that you walked out. You had always had a wash basin and a bucket of water to the side of your stove, so that you did, with a dipper on it, so that you would drink the water, and you always had a bucket of water there.
Do you have a well on the premises, or
No,
where,
there's no well.
where did you get your water?
From the hydrant.
Okay,
Pump it,
okay.
kind of an underground well.
That hydrant
Well,
is,
it would be a well then, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what I say.
It would have to be a well, that the hydrant with the.
It wasn't
the tap-
it wasn't city water, was it?
yeah,
Oh.
City lines?
you got me, it must have been, because it was
In
there.
Ephraim it would have been.
Long after we lived up here, why, I go down there as a kid, when we go down there, why,
Good water.
still drinking out of the old hydrant.
Well, I still wonder if it wasn't a well.
No, no well.
Why did Grandpa like dogs?
What?
Grandpa, LeVar, he always had a
He
dog.
had the darndest
He
time of dog.
always had a dog.
Did he have a dog as a kid?
Did you ever have dogs as kids?
Ever since I remember, we've always had dogs.
That's where he
Tell,
got.
Chris, tell Mary Ann about the little Boston Bull, maybe Mary Ann knows about it. He tried and tried to train, he paid a lot of money for a little Boston, it was darling. But he would have that thing in the house all morning, and he'd take it out, and he'd go out with it. Be out there pretty all day, come back in and then poop right in
I would hit him on his heel. He'd walk out, and his heels would be raw from that dog dipping him on. He
So
finally had
much
to
for
get rid
having
of
a
it.
dog. Well, I remember
tried.
Penny.
Oh, he tried.
And I do remember that Boston Bull, just
Did
before
you?
he got so very ill.
Then he had the Pekingese too, and
Yes, right.
they couldn't hear, and they were the most stupid. I thought, I never in my life want a Pekingese, because they were dumb. They don't hear because of the way their bone
did
structure, but
I
that
can
old
remember
Colorado
my
David.
old father, I was right after I got through with this year's Member's Croup deal. I can remember my father bringing home a billy goat that had been trained to pull. And that was the meanest thing you ever seen in your life. Boy, you'd clean the yard to everybody if you. But this Dewey Christensen, I remember, he took him right up the stair with that old stairs going up to the loft of the house. And the only way he could get away from the billy goat was climb up those stairs. And the goat chased him up and it followed him up halfway up the stairs, trying to get him. It was mean. But you hook it onto a wagon with a little harness on it. And gee, I could drive it all over the place over that. I was definitely afraid of it.
As long as it was ahead of you, you were safe.
The storehouse, was there a bishop storehouse, or was it a general town storehouse? What about in Ephraim?
There was never a storehouse.
Larry said,
Let's put it this way, in those days, there was no welfare. And no matter how poor you were, it was a sign of shame if you ever went and asked for anything. You would be starved to death before you admit that you were starving. It was a different situation now, and so people on welfare demanded it, said it's a right to have it, or like those days why everybody did for themselves.
So,
Larry says that your grandfather was the polygamist, is that right?
That's right.
And that his one wife crossed over the road or fell in the ditch, they found her dead lying on the ground, or what?
Oh, no, that was a neighbor.
That was a neighbor. Okay, well, Larry misunderstood then.
That would have been, her name was Annie, the first wife, not our family.
Okay.
And she was much older than Mary Ann, who was our mother. Her family was raised when Peter died. Mary Ann's family were still young. Orson Andrew was only, he was only about 5.
I don't know, there was, from what I could gather, there was ill feeling.
Oh, yeah, there
between
was.
the families.
And I'll send you the copy of this. It says excerpts, and I've got to find the whole thing.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
I will do it. I'll go home and do it tonight. He said that his mother's family, his grandmother's family, were very angry with Mary Ann because they said she cheated them out of inheritance, made grandfather Niels change his will when he was really sick. Well, I found the will, and I don't know if she changed it, but she really did. She got everything. There were parcels of land, there were horses, everything to go with the farm that she got, and each one, the wife, Annie, and her 4 or 5 children got $1.
Is that what it was?
That's what it
I
was.
knew there were Stevens there someplace.
Yeah, but you know, I try and think about this. Those children were all raised, and whether Niels had taken care of them and providing for them beforehand, I don't know. So
Well, I
that
know
she
one
had
thing
these
they
small
bragged
children.
about Mary Ann was that they said that old Niels Peter Anderson would live with one woman 1 week, and then the next week he'd move across the street and live with her for 1 week. That's the way he rotated it. I've heard this now. If you're guilty, you try to cover up your sins. Maybe I'd get on one side of the family, but I heard that he was a pretty straightforward old guy, and when it comes to divide anything, when he was living, why one got one thing, one the other got just the same amount. But maybe I know after he died, well, that's where I think the
Now that is,
family unity
that is the story
all-
that Vera tells in this tape that Vera's done. She said that your side, that Messina and that side of the family got it all, and the other.
Well, when he
the one-
died, he's
that's
talking
all
about when
we
they
know
were
about.
living, that he treated them very fairly when they
Well,
were living.
there's something else that was the opinion of our family, the immediate family. This family here of Messina, my grandmother, Orson and Andrew, there was the 2 boys. They were together. They got all that ground and everything. My brother sit down there, frankly stormed it, they did that once. And when they put out money up there, they'd sell a piece of ground here, a piece of ground there. And we had, they sold it to one lawyer down there, for 10, 15 acres, up east of Ephraim, our choice ground. And this lawyer come down there and wanted my mother to sign release, on the papers. She refused to do it. But he still bought it anyway, and mother never went by. We would always talk about what you ought to do, what you ought to do. Orson and Andrew actually went through looking at what they had.
That was all they had. They had no families.
Looking at it, they wasn't out of a great deal.
No.
Nothing loosely for them.
I think Chris has got a bill of sale, and I think he fell heir to a hoe and a shovel and
He gave it to me.
gave it to Venice.
That's what you got when your father died, was a shovel and a hoe?
Well, that was what
Larry says to ask you, he says Merlin Olson was your neighbor. Did you play with Merlin Olson's dad, I guess it would be? Any of the other friends, what do you remember about him or them?
Only he could run like a scared cat. We'd chase him, we never could catch him.
Well, that's where his kids got it then, so they could play football.
That's a kid, we'd chase him, and he could just run circles around.
did Grandpa LeVar know Thorpe B. Isaacson when he was young?
What?
Thorpe B.
Grandpa
Isaac.
know Thorpe B. Isaacson when they were young, down in
I would
Ephraim?
imagine so.
Because, you know, Grandpa used to say, well, I don't know how he can be the presiding bishop of the church.
I
He was
think
one
he
of my
went-
drinking
I
buddies.
think he went to the Snow College with it. He
Ah,
went to the
okay.
Snow College.
Okay.
Okay.
Better give me a copy of that, Venice.
There's your
One
violin.
violin, box of carpenter tools, 12.
What'd you do with the bees? She
He-
gave you
he
12
had-
colonies
he-
of bees. What'd you do with them?
Mary Ann, we had honey, he raised bees in
Well, those
Mapleton.
bees were actually as much mine as you would.
No, this is yours. This is what you got.
This
That's
is
what's it.
mine.
I wonder
Venice,
what
you
you
gave
did.
this to Venice, you gave this to
Because,
Venice.
because I played the violin, that's included in there, and you said, here, you may have this.
Why don't you get a copy, give
But
us a
I'm just
copy
being,
of it.
I'm just being silly
That
here
is-
asking
that
you
is
to
the
do
I
bill.
this.
can't read it.
Well, it says, for $1.
Oh, Venice, look, on your floor.
Okay. One violin, I'll get it, it's just water. One violin, box of carpenter tools, 12 colonies of bees, one sleigh bells, one quart of sleigh bells.
I've got that.
Yeah. So
That's what you got from your
that's
mother.
what you got.
It's interesting to me what will, we find to be so important, you know, families.
You know what my
And how
mother,
upset they get over it when somebody
when
dies.
my
They don't get
mother
it.
died, we were, I'm sorry, Dennis, I forgot all
I,
about
I did it, it was me.
I
It's
know,
just
but
water.
I should have put.
It's just water, I'm not worried.
I should have
Well,
put
Mary
that.
Ann, is there anything else you wanna ask him?
No, he remembered.
We
Amen.
was just thinking about when my mother died, and there was somewhat feelings in the middle of
Oh,
the spirit.
Mary
And
Ann,
look
bitter
at- look at
feelings,
back at it.
really. Two sisters that I don't want to paint any negative pictures, but there was things that didn't amount to a hill of beans.
Of her belongings.
Yeah, Grandma Christensen's things, yeah, it's so stupid.
Did she have a rocking chair?
Yeah, Vera, I think Vera got one.
Well, Grandpa gave me a rocking chair.
Oh, I don't.
And he said, well, this belonged to your great-grandmother, and I don't know which
Oh,
one it was,
okay.
but I mean, it's kind of
Well,
short
even-
to the ground, and it has no arms in it. I mean, it's just a straight back, kind of like a kitchen chair with legs on it, although it did have a little
Vera
piece of-
did fall heir to one of Arson's in this tape. He and Vera did a tape. It isn't the best, and Venice has a copy of it, but she fell heir. Byron didn't want her to have it, but she scrubbed it and cleaned it up and varnished it. But she did get a rocking chair
I
from down
said
in
Your
Arson's.
grandpa was kind of a sticker.
Oh, you're not telling us anything we don't know. What's mine,
Well,
what's
yeah,
yours
all
is
the
mine,
things-
and what mine is
A lot
mine.
of things I admired about Martha, there was a great deal,
Well,
a lot
no,
of things
Chris,
that I
don't
didn't
say
admire.
it so it's on
No,
tape, on
I know
record.
that there
No.
were some things that
Don't
he-
say it, don't say it.
But I just wondered if that happened to be, you know, one of the rockers, or rocking chair for Grandma
Could
Christensen.
have been. You know, I don't remember, she didn't have a lot of furniture, a lot of,
It would be almost, you know, no arms on it, just like, you know, a kitchen chair.
was trying to
type.
get a
Tell us about the bed you slept on. Did you sleep with brother, sister, or anything in Ephraim?
well, they had the
I
tick
never,
bed
never had it.
Where'd you
No.
sleep?
up in the loft, didn't you?
I can't even remember.
Well, think about it.
You slept up in the loft, I think, well, maybe that was out in the steel plant, I guess, where you slept up in the loft.
I can't remember.
I think, you know, just, he's probably.
What toys?
What I
Did you
can
have any?
remember, the earliest I can ever remember was sleeping with mother and dad.
It's probably warmer. And there
Probably
were
needed
brothers
to.
to sleep with.
Is that just
They
about-
had the old tick, you know, the old straw ticks, they weren't feather ticks, they were straw ticks. And they put straw on the floor with some kind of a mat. That's what they had for carpeting.
Did your dad, or did your mother weave? Did she do rag rugs or
She
anything that way?
crocheted, Grandma always crocheted, Grandma always.
She even had up here, she bought a
A loom?
loom, a big red, after we were married, did she still make?
Well, she crocheted like the things like Ben's got on the back of the chair.
Above red
I don't remember Grandma ever making a rug.
She had a regular loom and she made
In
the
his
red
parents'
rug.
lifetime, they never went to the temple like he did.
They did.
In their lifetime, they did.
Yeah, your parents went to the temple before you were born. 1917. They did.
Did they?
They did.
Well, if I've got that in any genealogy.
I will go, I've got the film number and everything, I'll
Well,
go look at it
if we're
again.
through here, should we
Yeah.
turn this off and then go look at some of the stuff that you've
Yeah,
got?
I
I want to
appreciate
ask,
what you
I
have.
want to ask Cleon something if I could,
Okay.
on mine if you want.
Dad?
Chris, hey.
Just a minute, he's telling a story.
I'm just wondering, he's probably done it, but have you ever tried to just take my notes out and just ask him about each relative, say, what do you remember about your great-grandparents, what do you remember about your grandparents, about your cousins?
This
This is the most we've done, right here.
Went down the street,
Except,
hit
like I
the
said, I
pea
did it
right
at the
here,
river.
and there was
I'm looking
one
forward to looking
And
at
if
that.
you'll,
15
I'll let you
kids.
stop at Kiko's or
Run
something, and
alongside
get a
the
coffee
wagon,
from
to
there,
pull
you
it
know.
on pea vines.
These are, there's nothing in them, I guess, I don't think, they're just envelopes, I don't know if Grandpa was saving them for the stamps or not, but look at those, every one of them is two.
He had a stamp collection, but he maintained that it was stolen when he was out in that Eddie Lane's garage, when he was on his mission, which I don't know that I believe him or
He
not.
told, well, the story I always heard was that, I don't know how a person does this, although I did come across this, look at this. I came across this in his papers today.
No hard feelings with this
I think this is his handwriting, but it looks like it's a little piece of paper where he's adding up what it cost to build his house
Oh.
in Mapleton. He's got down here plumbing, heating, brick, mason,
And I will
fireplace.
send that to
And
you.
I'd always heard that he spent about $8,000 back then, is what I'd always heard.
Now, I don't know what his house
And-
cost.
But down here, he's over here about this. But I had heard, the story we'd always heard is that he used his stamp collection to pay for his
Well,
house.
I'll
All
send
right,
that to you,
I
and I have
didn't
some
know that.
videos
So you
here, I'll
don't-
give to
Now,
them.
know
there's, he left, I have a collection, it's not organized, it's from the bag. But he had all of his leftover stamps in a bag, and it's very hard to do anything with, because you can't trust anybody enough,
I'll
where if
see
you
if
go to
we can
somebody
get
who can do it, and they're like that, they're not inventoried, he can just take anything out of there and say,
I
it's
will,
gone, so there's
in
no way
fact,
to evaluate
it
it
says
unless you go,
excerpts
unless
from
someone meticulously goes
Peter
through.
Anderson's family,
and
and
Yeah,
I
I knew
But,
he had.
but when
to see if
when I went to
in the
ask somebody
archives
about
there
it,
they have the whole
they told me
volume.
that what he did, and on this one was, he went big into what they call
That I don't
first aid
know.
covers.
That He
And I guess
doesn't
ended up being
mention
a
that here, I
gamble.
don't know whether they
Like,
were just
if the
together
first day they
there,
were gonna
I suspect,
issue a stamp
together
to
there in
someplace,
Sanford
he would
County.
buy a stamp for that, put it on an envelope, set it off, have it stay canceled, and come back and be the first day that went out. Well, they said if he would've just saved the stamp and not had the stamp
And I think they were.
issue, it would've
I
been
think
worth
they were.
something, but instead he's got all of these ones that he got.
You know, we've got,
Kitty hogs.
there was supposed to have been airmail out of Provo. I got the first airmail stamp out of Provo. He ran them off.
Yeah.
But anyway,
They
it didn't
Yeah,
materialize.
so
But
he's got a
he ran
bunch
those through, but,
But these right here, all these envelopes, you know, I mean, they tell you certain people and their relatives. I mean, here's from P.C. Anderson to Orson and P. Anderson.
Oh, I
Orson,
didn't know.
Orson and P.
That's
and
Orson, we
Ellen.
used to go down as a
Yeah.
child.
So that's not his dad,
No,
that's,
that's
Just
his
kind of
uncle.
behind her
Oh,
back.
Orson
sold
and Andrew.
things.
because look at all these, I've always
See,
heard
Orson
Orson.
never married, he was deaf.
Okay.
You know that Lamar, when he was 12 years old, they had what they call a traveling, they would take out tonsils. They'd come to your house, and he was 12 years old, and they strapped him to the table, took his tonsils out without any anesthetic. And that's what, he was deaf the rest of his life.
You know, Mother told
Dad
me the reason
says
he went
that
deaf is
he was
because
not Orson,
grandmother
he was Peter
put
Anderson.
oil in his ears when
But
he had
said
earache
to us
and
he
it burned,
wanted that family
it was too
name.
hot.
Well,
So he
they,
told
according to
himself-
him, they
Well, no,
took
Orson
his
is
tonsils
But
out.
his name, Dad, what did you say Orson's real name is?
Orson Pratt.
He threw in the young
And
kid.
he put Niels
And I
Peter,
think
he
it
changed
was,
it.
I think it was Orson,
Do you have that
Orson
one, Mary Ann?
Erastus Pratt or Orson
I do,
Pratt
but I-
Erastus.
With you on the
It
front
was
porch?
just Orson Pratt. I know.
That's for your family with your mom.
But I know definitely it was Orson Pratt because he was named after the.
You ever seen that, Cleon?
Chris?
That's the deputy sheriff's
That's,
badge.
I'll bet you that's my dad's
Do you want me to stop
deputy
this?
sheriff I was telling you about.
Well, tell us about it, because I've never heard anything about it.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what he did, come up from Ephraim, that's what they made him. a
That's what I was
deputy.
just telling him when we
Yeah,
lived
but-
up in the steel plant out there.
They made him
They
a
made him a
deputy
deputy sheriff, so he was a legal
night watchman.
Well, that's what
representative
that's
of the
for.
law out there. I was telling you about that.
Yeah, well, that's what that's for.
No?
Does that mean, if that means a lot to you, take it,
Take it. Could you remember that?
keep it in your family so you don't.
You sure you want that?
Well, it's
Just
yours.
mention
He said you
You're
could
the
have
one,
it.
you're the one that knew about it, so
Well-
you're the one that should have it.
Well, that's very kind of you.
You ought to see the
That
stuff.
really
Got to
is.
go-
Why don't you keep it
No,
home
because
with your?
you know about it. It means
You
a lot
know
to
about it, he
I
said
don't-
you know
I
about
don't
it.
even know, that's why I'm
He
sitting
didn't
here,
even
I'm
know
saying,
what it
tell me
was.
about your dad, because I know so little about him. But go ahead and keep that,
Where'd you get that from, LaFleur?
just and all that. And I'm sure that your story, I'm sure, is probably one where Grandpa probably got way more than he was supposed to get, all that.
He got everything,
Absolutely.
practically.
Well,
We're going
you
through a little bit of
know,
that in our
LeVar,
family,
let
we
me
know.
let me tell you
Should we
this.
turn the recorder
Grandma,
off? Are we
oh,
through
yeah, I'll
telling
turn it off.
stories?
Grandma Christensen. Now, I